How's it going? So if you've just begun learning about procedural materials and you just kind of feel like it's so easy to make them look bad, which is understandable because you're starting from scratch as opposed to image textures, which they do all the work for you really. So what I did was I picked about 5 really common mistakes that beginners make when making procedural materials that really make them fall flat, and they're all very fixable mistakes. Some of them are tricks, some of them are kind of workflows, but they are really going to help you make those procedural materials really go a little bit farther to making them look real and just making them look better. So the first tip is if you have patterns, don't make them look so sharp if you're trying to go for something real. So here I made kind of a bad representation of fingerprints, but it'll bring my point home. Notice how sharp those shapes are, and if you zoom out, you can see they're still very sharp. So what you could do in your node system is introduce a noise texture or some kind of blurring situation where then you can blur that, and then when you back up, it's a little bit more believable that it's a smudge, that it's a fingerprint, even though these aren't very realistic fingerprints. You get the idea with different shapes that need to be blurred because that's how they are in real life. You could do that procedurally and it really helps them out. My next tip is use references, but don't just use Google search references. Let me show you, in my opinion, the best way to use references. So go to something like CC0 textures where you can get image textures. Go ahead and pick one, and I pick a really high resolution one so you can zoom in. I always like to look at roughness maps because roughness tends to be the struggle for me, and just zoom in and notice the components that you're gonna have to make this look absolutely real. Because this is an image texture, this is realistic. So why not use it as the base? And if you can strip them down to your bump, to your color, to your roughness, and really get insights into that, it's gonna help you. So you see, we definitely need some scratches. So let's go ahead and watch a scratch tutorial. And then we have these little blobs, which is like a noise texture with a little bit of deformation. And then we have kind of large scale, maybe Musgrave messed up, maybe stack them with these kind of, which is, this is very achievable stuff. And once you learn how to stack those things, then you can really go into realistic procedural materials. Now I want to pause really quickly and let you guys know that there's currently a discount exclusive for people watching this tutorial for real-time materials. Use the code RTM15 and get 15% off on the real-time materials add-on. Now, very quickly, if you haven't heard of the real-time materials add-on, it is an add-on that I created that has currently 290 procedural materials that you can apply to anything with one click. We have some pretty crazy cloth materials with just so much editability. 30 metal materials currently, updates are free. We have carbon fiber, which you can actually change the color. We have a lot of different edits for those, and some really useful exterior materials like stucco and asphalt, and one of my favorite newest additions, the really cool leather materials. So you can get that right now in the description. Use the code RTM15 to get 15% off. Let's get into the rest of these tips. All right, one very common major mistake is having your bump too strong. So if you want to have these gashes like that, or even have these little micro bumps, I see a lot of people making their bump too strong or making another mistake. So there's 2 mistakes we're going to fix here. First, we have this strength. So say, hey, I don't like how it's darkening here. I don't like how it does that. So I'm going to bring it down, but now, oh crap, now it's just not as deep as I want it to look. Well, keep your strength as high as you want it, because that's going to make sure how deep that's going to be. But your distance right here, bring it down to 0.1, and that is going to clear up that problem for you. So don't forget, put your distance at 0.1 most of the time. At least I found for me works better most of the time. And you can even see these little small bumps over here. Make that 0.1 as well, and that's going to alleviate problems down the line when rendering in cycles or dealing with different lighting situations. That's going to expose the mistakes. 0.1 is really going to help hide any mistakes and really fix that mistake. If you're interested in making things look realistic, there's one thing that they'll tell you all the time, and this applies to procedural materials as well. Don't make anything 100% most of the time. So for example, with your color, don't make it 100% vibrant. That just doesn't exist in real life. And when it comes to baking out these procedural materials, you want it to be as accurate as possible. So you notice on this orange, it is not all the way up here. It's right around down here, and you can even bring it darker as well to make it more of a realistic paint. And also when dealing with your roughness, let's look at this color ramp right here. And if I bring this color down to 100% black, you can notice now it's really glossy. So the lighter color, the more rough. So notice here on the super rough part, so if it's pure white, it's gonna be very rough. Notice it's right here. It's not up here. It's just gonna clip out, and it might not be noticeable, but it can be noticeable depending on your lighting. So make sure that your roughness isn't always 100% or 0. So make sure 0, 100%, be very careful with those. When you're driving realism, try to teeter away from them just a little bit to make it more believable. Now this tip isn't just for making things realistic, also applies to stylistic and just kind of artistic materials, but not everything is perfect. In fact, if you look around, almost every surface has some kind of imperfection on it. It's very rare to find just totally perfect surfaces. So when it comes to making just nice looking materials, keep that in mind because that's really going to help them. So example, we have this material right here, which is from the abstract pack and the real-time materials. But notice there's no imperfection here. It's perfectly smooth, which sometimes looks good. I've done that before, but I find that, say, if we go over here to the roughness, so if we go here to the roughness dialog here on the add-on, I'm just going to give it a roughness of 5. So now we have a little bit of bump, which I want it to be subtle, so I'll just keep it very minimal. But we also have roughness. Let me bring my bump down to 0. Now we can just focus on roughness. In my opinion, look how much nicer this looks. It's just a little bit more interesting, adds a little bit more visual interest, and makes it feel like you can actually reach out and grab it compared to maybe a perfectly smooth material. And those are my 5 tips. I'll give you another bonus one. Just spend a lot more time when you're making procedural materials. Look at them for a lot longer. Don't make super quick ones. Look at them for all the time, really stare at them, figure out what else you can add. But with that being said, those are my tips. I hope you learned some stuff from this. This was definitely more of like a beginner focused video. If you are a pro, feel free to put your recommendations in the comments. I encourage that. But with that being said, there you go. Feel free to check out real-time materials and get that discount code if you want to use that. That's exclusive for people watching this video. So thank you guys for watching, and I hope you learned something.